Buenos días, jugadores de Yu-Gi-Oh! Y bienvenidos a Yu-Gi-Oh! En Ropa Profesional. Soy su presentador, el RJP0. And I am not doing the rest of this video in Spanish. I got bored. Anyway, in my last discussion video, I emphasized how important it is to business casual players to maintain our skill as players and to commit to becoming better at the game so that we can be more innovative, more creative, be more competitive, and ultimately have more fun in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! However, it is easy for me to preach at you guys and go, y'all suck, get better. It's another thing entirely to begin a conversation, or at least participate in the conversation that's existing already, about the process required to become a more competitive, a better player in general. What I'm going to give you guys today is not a set of tips and tricks that when you're playing the game, you look at the board a totally different way and suddenly you become Patrick Hoban. No, what I'm going to talk to you guys about today are a set of practices that I think it's important for every competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Player to participate in, to do consistently in order to become better players. Because let's face it, instant tricks to becoming a better player are, for the most part, bogus. Real skill takes work and it takes time. It isn't something that you get overnight. So this set of practices are going to be things that you have to do a lot before you actually become a really and truly better player. The things that I'm going to be talking about have nothing to do with learning the rules of the game because, in all honesty, I really think you guys should know that already. If you are going into competitive gameplay, you really should already know the difference between damage calculation and the damage step, or if, when effects and how they affect missing timing. Things like that are things you should already know. I shouldn't have to explain to you guys why those are important to becoming a better player. So the things that I'm going to talk to you guys about today are 3 things that you can do in order to maintain your skill, in order to keep yourself sharp in the game, in order to become better as a player. So the very first one is studying the experts. I know. There's a lot of like weird celebrity worship in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Where we have this weird thing where we like only expect like the famous players to do well and we only pay attention to a deck when they use it, but then we absolutely hate them for some reason. I don't get it, but learning from the experts is really important in order to learn to become a better player, because when you look at these people, they are, let's face it, much more successful than we are. I do not have the same record as Billy Brake or somebody like that. I am not as good a player as him. And he's been much more successful. So learning how he plays the game teaches me a little bit about some new ways to look at the game that people have been successful in the past. It doesn't mean that I necessarily have to instantly subscribe to his theory in the game, but it means that I'm going to be getting a better idea of how more successful players have played the game in the past. This means a few things. First, studying their decks is really important. A lot of the players that are famous in today's game are famous because of their ability to make decks. People like Rob Boyajin, Patrick Hoban's deck building is basically the core of his theory. Billy Brake's ability to modify decks to become better. These are things that we know players for. So when a player does well in a tournament, it's important to us to look at their decks and figure out how they did so well. This is why I do so many deck analyses on my channel. And this also includes not being afraid to net deck. I realize there's a huge stigma against it, like you're not a good player if you try out somebody else's deck, but screw what other people think. The best way to learn how a deck works is to play it yourself. So if you want to learn how a player was so successful with a certain build of a deck, you play it. But it also takes learning how the original pilot played the game, which leads me to the second part of the process of learning from the experts, which is watching their gameplay. Read the feature matches. When a YCS comes around, read the feature matches and look at how the successful players play the game, because their in-game skill gives us insight into how we can play the game differently for ourselves. For instance, if a player holds on to a trap card for longer than you would expect them to, and then they use it at a time that suddenly was better, keep that in mind for when you play the game next. So you read the feature matches, you watch the live streams when ARGCS comes around. I realize misplays happen and people talk about the misplays, at the ARGCS all the time, but recognizing that they are misplays is a step in the right direction because it means you're becoming a better player. So reading the feature matches, watching the games, and the last part of this particular step in the process is reading up on those players' theory. When a player posts on the ARG website or an article on TCG Player, read it. You may disagree with it, but that's absolutely fine. Reading these players' theory gives you a greater diversity of ideas of how to play the game, which brings me to my next step in the process of becoming a better Yu-Gi-Oh player, which is participating in discussions. When you talk to other competitive players about certain cards, decks, ideas, gameplay, things, all of those things, you get ideas from other people. You may disagree with those ideas, but they're things to keep in mind that may bring you to have other ideas in the future. And it's great to have a diversity of opinions, which is why when I'm on my Facebook page and I'm talking to people, I encourage arguing. Arguing is great. You'd be amazed at the bulk of ideas that come out of a good argument. And the final step in the process of becoming a better Yu-Gi-Oh player is practice. And when I say practice, I don't mean just picking a deck to screw around with on DN looking for players with the lowest score possible. I mean when you're going on Dueling Network, you find your best deck or you create a deck that you want to be your best deck and you fight your way to the top of the ratings in the rated section. Or you go to locals and you play against players that you know to be good, and you do this for hours. You don't just kind of randomly do a duel every once in a while when you have time to do it that you don't want to devote to something else that betters your life, I suppose. Go and play the game. Play at your highest level, and that's what practice is. It is being diligent and playing against the best players possible, risking losing. Go ahead and lose. When you lose, you find out where things went wrong, and then you become a better player. So practice is incredibly important. It has to be serious practice and play testing. So those are just a set of practices that I think that every player needs to go through in order to become more competitive, in order to be better Yu-Gi-Oh players. Of course, there are probably more, so talk to me about them in the comment section below. Meanwhile, I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't, let me know why in the comment section below. And of course, subscribe for more decks, discussion, analysis, and general Yu-Gi-Oh shenanigans. Thank you guys for watching Yu-Gi-Oh! And Business Casual. I'm your host, the RJBZO, and I gotta jet.